Is it adaptability or self-abandonment? 5 signs you're losing your authenticity as a leader, by Leslie Rohonczy. I was watching the 1999 movie Runaway Bride on a rainy Sunday. In it, Julia Roberts plays a woman who has become remarkably skilled at adapting herself to each man she plans to marry. Every fiancé likes his eggs prepared differently, and every time she claims that his favorite is hers too. Eventually, she sits down with a plate of eggs prepared in several different ways because she has no idea how she actually likes them. I'm sure that no one has ever derailed their career by pretending to like scrambled eggs, but changing your leadership identity with every new boss or initiative can be considerably more expensive. Imagine working for 3 different executives in 3 years. The first rewards decisiveness, so you learn to arrive with an answer. The second values collaboration, so you become careful not to sound too certain. The third wants relentless optimism, so you become reluctant to name risks or issues. You've adapted successfully to all 3, but when someone finally asks you what you genuinely think about a significant decision, you can bet that you'd struggle to answer. Like Julia Roberts' character surveying that plate of eggs, you will have become much better at identifying other people's preferences than locating your own. Adaptability is one of the most celebrated qualities in leadership, and for good reason. Knowing how to read a room, flex your communication style, support a decision you might not have made yourself, and keep things moving when the organizational furniture is being rearranged around you are all important leadership skills. But adaptability has a shadow side. If you keep reshaping yourself around every new person, priority, pressure, and preference, eventually you may struggle to remember what you genuinely stand for. The line is easy to miss. Self-abandonment is a pretty weighty term, but it doesn't feel that way at the beginning, which is why it can take on a life of its own without our awareness. It usually happens one reasonable little accommodation at a time. Your new boss prefers shorter, more decisive conversations, so you become more concise. That makes sense. Then you notice that questions are interpreted as resistance, so you begin asking fewer of them. The organization announces an ambitious transformation, and you help your team get behind it. That is part of leadership. Then you realize the timelines are unrealistic, but everyone else appears enthusiastic, so you keep your concerns to yourself. Your workload expands temporarily during a reorganization. You agree to stretch because your business genuinely needs you. 6 months later, the temporary assignment has become your job, and you've stopped mentioning the cost because you don't want to appear inflexible. No single decision feels dramatic enough to count as self-abandonment. The pattern becomes visible only when you step back far enough to see what has accumulated. You are working harder to anticipate what other people want than to determine what you believe. You are editing your contribution before anyone else has the opportunity to respond to it. You have become exceptionally skilled at reading the room, while gradually disappearing from it. Authenticity doesn't mean refusing to adapt. Leaders sometimes confuse authenticity with saying everything they think, exactly as they think it. That would not be authenticity. Effective leadership requires judgment about timing, language, context, and audience. You can remain true to your values while changing how you express them. You can disagree with a decision and still help implement it responsibly. You can choose not to raise every concern in a meeting without becoming complicit or voiceless. The crucial question is whether you're making these choices consciously. Healthy adaptability sounds like this: I understand what the situation requires, and I am choosing how best to respond. Self-abandonment sounds more like this: I know what I think, but it's no longer safe, useful, or career-enhancing to let anyone else know. In a study published in the Journal of Psychology, research on authenticity at work supports the idea that it is distinct from simply fitting in at work, and that it is meaningfully related to well-being outcomes such as burnout and boredom. In other words, when people feel unable to show up authentically, it can be associated with poorer experiences at work. This means that fitting in and feeling like you can be yourself are not the same thing. None of this means every preference needs to be defended as identity. Refusing to learn a new system because that's just not me isn't authenticity, it's avoidance. but it does mean that repeatedly overriding your own judgment, values, and limits come at a cost. The deeper issue is self-trust. When we keep overriding ourselves, we often assume the problem is confidence. Sometimes it is, but the deeper issue may be self-trust. Confidence asks, can I handle this? Self-trust asks, can I rely on my own perceptions, judgment, values, and experience, even when other people see things differently? Leaders with self-trust can reconsider an opinion without assuming they were wrong to hold it. They can receive feedback without reconstructing their entire identity around it, and adapt to a new boss without treating that person's preferences as universal leadership law. And they can also recognize that discomfort doesn't automatically mean they're doing something wrong or need to change themselves. Organizations send constant signals about what gets rewarded. We learn which opinions receive the nod of approval, which questions make the room tense, and which behaviors are described as not quite executive enough. We also notice who gets invited back into the conversation. Responding intelligently to those signals can be politically astute. The danger begins when we allow them to replace our internal compass. Our organizations hired us for our experience, judgment, and perspective. If we continually reshape all three to resemble the people above and around us, we may become easier to manage. We may also become considerably less valuable. 5 signs we may have crossed the line. The shift from adaptability to self-abandonment often appears in ordinary leadership habits. These patterns can be difficult to recognize in ourselves because many of them begin as reasonable leadership choices. Any one of these behaviors may be situational, but a repeated pattern deserves a closer look. Number 1, we consult the room before we consult ourselves. Before deciding what we think, we scan for the safest or most popular position. By the time we read everyone else's reactions, our own view has become difficult to locate. Reading the room is a valuable leadership capability. The problem begins when everyone else's response becomes the raw material from which we construct our own. Number 2, we keep moving our limits. We agree to one more responsibility, one more unreasonable deadline, or one more evening of work. Every exception can be justified, but together, the exceptions become our operating model. Adaptability sometimes requires a temporary stretch. Self-abandonment turns temporary stretches into permanent expectations because we're reluctant to risk disappointing anyone by resetting the boundary. Number 3, we translate disagreement into personal failure. When someone challenges our view, we don't just reconsider the idea. We immediately question whether we were too direct, too difficult, too sensitive, too cautious, or simply too much, or not enough. Thoughtful leaders examine their impact. When we are losing self-trust, we may automatically assume that another person's discomfort is evidence of our own failure. Number 4, our leadership identity changes with every new boss. Different leaders reward different behaviors based on their own personal communication preferences and decision-making styles. We may find ourselves reshaping our style to match shifting expectations, which can gradually dilute our own sense of self. Expanding our range is healthy. The concern is whether each adaptation adds to our leadership capacity or replaces a piece of it. And number 5, we feel relief when someone else says what we were thinking. This can be one of the clearest clues. We had the concern, question, or alternative perspective, but waited until someone else made it safe to acknowledge. There are sensible reasons to choose the right moment or allow another person to lead. But if our first reaction is consistently relief that someone else took the risk, it may be worth asking why our own voice remains suppressed. Keep your center and expand your range. The answer is not to become less adaptable. Senior leaders need considerable range, especially when organizations are contending with new technologies, changing workforce expectations, economic uncertainty, and frequent structural changes. The opportunity is to build that range around a stable center of gravity. Our center includes the values we project, the judgment we've earned through experience, the limits required for sustainable performance, and the leadership contribution we want to make. Our range includes the many ways that we can communicate, collaborate, experiment, and respond. A tree survives strong winds partly because it can bend and flex, but its ability to move also depends on having roots. Professional roots don't make us rigid. They allow us to flex without being carried away. One place to begin is by separating what must remain stable from what is available for adaptation. For example, our communication style may be adaptable, but our integrity is not. Our methods may be adaptable, but our standards cannot disappear. Our timing may be adaptable, but our conviction that an important risk needs to be raised may remain firm. Our role may evolve, but our values are non-negotiable. These distinctions are rarely obvious in the moment. They become clearer when we move beyond asking, "What does the organization need from me?" to ask a deeper question, "What do I need to remain authentic as a leader?" Before we adapt again, the next time we feel pressure to reshape ourselves around a person or situation, we can pause long enough to examine what we're changing. We can ask ourselves, where am I deciding to override my judgment, and what's driving my decision? What specifically am I trying to avoid? What have I not yet said, and what's holding me back from saying it now? Which part of this situation genuinely requires my flexibility? Which value, limit, or responsibility needs to remain intact? If I continue responding this way for another year, what will the impact be on me? Most leadership accommodations and adjustments are simply part of working effectively with other human beings who remain stubbornly committed to being different from us. The challenge is to notice when a useful strength has started working against us. Adaptability should give us more ways to lead, connect, and navigate complexity, not require us to leave ourselves behind. Your coaching challenge. Find 30 minutes of quiet time when you can do this exercise in a calm state without rushing or being interrupted. Recall one recent moment where you adapted yourself to the room, then left the conversation feeling frustrated, diminished, resentful, or unlike yourself. Reconstruct that moment as specifically as you can. And when you have it clearly in your mind, answer the following questions. Number 1, before you began adjusting to everyone else, what did you genuinely think, want, need, or believe? Number 2, what did you choose to say or do instead? And what were you trying to protect? Approval, credibility, belonging, harmony, opportunity, or something else? Number 3, what did you assume might happen if you expressed your real perspective, held your limit, or acted on your own judgment? What evidence supports that assumption, and what evidence challenges it? Number 4, who or what benefited from your accommodation? What did it cost you, your team, or the quality of the decision? Number 5, if you could replay that moment with both adaptability and self-trust, what would you keep about your approach, and what would you change? And number 6, identify one upcoming situation in which you're likely to repeat this pattern. What specifically will you say, ask, decline, or protect so that you can remain flexible without leaving yourself behind? We don't need to reject other people's preferences or sample every possible kind of eggs. We simply need to know which choices are genuinely ours. Adaptability remains one of the greatest strengths of effective leadership. Self-trust prevents that strength from becoming an overstrength and consuming the leader who possesses it. If you want to explore how to remain adaptable without losing your self-trust or leaving yourself behind, reach out for a free executive coaching conversation at leslierohonczy.com. Have a smooth day.